Welcome back to the channel, folks. Today we are back to work on the 3rd gen Honda Prelude, and I have a new 5-speed transmission. We're going to take a look at that later. For starters, I want to go ahead and get the oil drained out of the oil pan, as I'm going to have to drop that thing in the next week or so and replace the oil pan gasket. I've got the oil pan, hoping that when we drain the oil out of this, we also don't get metal chunks like we did with the transmission. We don't have any metal chunks, so that's a really good sign. And the oil actually looks pretty decent, to be honest with you. It's not too bad. It's a little brown, but still got a little bit of gold left to it. Because the 3rd gen Prelude's oil pan really needs a new gasket, and I'm gonna have to drop the oil pan, I'm letting this thing just drain out entirely. I'm gonna let it sit for a while, and while I'm doing that, I'm gonna jump on the transmission, the new one, and get it cleaned up, and then show you guys up close how it looks. For hours now, I've been just going ham with the degreaser and a scrub brush. This is what it looks like. The other day I left you guys off with me just cleaning up this new transmission. Here's how it looks. I'd say it's 150 times better than when I picked it up. It was pretty covered in oil and gunk, and now both the inside and outside are looking really fresh. So that'll just make handling this and reinstalling everything a lot better, a little bit cleaner. And speaking of cleaner, I still have a lot of degreasing to do on this. With the transmission out, I have loads of room underneath the motor now to kind of just degrease and clean things up. So I'll definitely be tackling that soon. Before I install the new transmission, I need to replace the oil pan gasket and the rear main seal. So that is still on the to-do list. Today, I want to go ahead and try and remove the exhaust from the headers pretty much all the way back, because you need to drop that down to get the oil pan to drop down. And I'm just gonna bang that out so that way when I'm ready to do the oil pan, the exhaust is already removed, and hopefully we can just make that job as easy as possible. I found there are 14 mils, and I need like the double extendo here to get to it, which is gonna be sketchy because they're on there pretty tight. So I also need to use the breaker bar to try and get leverage to get them off. Ugh. Holy moly. There's one. I think I might have cross-threaded it. That bolt looks pretty toasted. So that might need to get replaced. I mean, yeah, it's like shredded apart. Jeez. I think my ratchet's given up. Oh. The 3 bolts off of the headers, and I'll try and show you guys. The 3 bolts I undid were up here on the headers, but there's also a bracket right here, if you guys can see that, that's held on by a couple 14 mils on the other side there. So that needs to come off, and then we can hopefully drop the exhaust hangers right there and drop this whole exhaust system away from the actual oil pan here. I ended up pulling off another exhaust hanger, so I actually got this whole thing to fall down and really far away from the actual oil pan, so now we have loads of room to work under there. If you guys remember this cross beam here, we ended up taking it off before, and I had to put it back on to jack the Prelude back up, but it's gonna make taking the oil pan out a little bit more difficult. So I'm gonna go ahead, remove this. It's I want to say these are 14 mils, 3 on this side, 3 on the other side. Now we have loads of room around this really oily, greasy pan here. There's a bunch of bolts going around the perimeter of it that I need to remove to drop the pan. I don't think I'm going to do it today because it's getting a little late in the day, but I'll probably pick things right back up and we'll drop this pan, clean it up a bunch, get the gasket changed, put it back up, and then we're on to the rear main seal and the transmission. So today, it's a new day again, and I'm gonna pull off the oil pan. It's time. I've been waiting for the weather to kind of cooperate and be less wet, just because it's not gonna be a fun job. But today, we're close enough. It's time to pull the oil pan off and change the gasket, get it put back up there, change the rear main seal, put the transmission back on, and hopefully drive this car into the sunset. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna try the rubber mallet, give it a few good whacks maybe and see if I can break it loose. Everything's aluminum, so you really don't want to pry on anything because you'll definitely bend or scratch it. We're gonna give it a shot and see if I can pop it loose. Oh, got it. There it is. So I was kind of just pulling down on the drain plug, which gave me just enough leverage. Now I need to figure out how to wiggle this off. Alright, I'm just gonna break it there. That way we can at least drop the pan down, which looks to be in awesome shape. Heck yeah, dude. Oh, I'm so stoked to see that. And even the gasket, I mean, it's definitely a little cracky, I guess, if you will. But it doesn't look too bad at all. Now it's time to clean up this oil pan and get this old gasket all the way off of there. There we go. Old gasket is off. Here's a quick look at what I'm going to be using for my gasket and gasket sealer. I'm using the Ultra Black, which is oil resistant, and then this Fel Pro oil pan gasket. So I'm just pretty much done cleaning up the oil pan. I'm going to go back under here, clean up that surface a bit more, and then hopefully reinstall this thing before it starts to rain. I actually just realized before I put the oil pan back in, I need to change the rear main seal, which is just down there. I need to pull the plate off, change the seal itself, use a little RTV to put it back on, and then I should be able to put the oil pan all back together, and hopefully everything seals up really nicely. Off camera, I went ahead and pressed in the new rear main seal into its housing, and then I've also gone ahead and cleaned up the entire oil pan, made sure all of the old sealant is removed from the rim of it, and I think things are just about ready to go back in order. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this Ultra Black sealant maker on this edge here of the rear main seal, get that put on, and then I have an actual rubber gasket, but I'm also gonna use some of this on the oil pan too to put it back up. I almost forgot. I've been sitting here cleaning all the oil pan screws. It's taking forever and I'm just going through loads of stuff, and that's kind of just been encompassing this whole job. Is everything's really greasy, oily, and I've just been having to spend a ton of time cleaning everything up so that way it does look good when I go ahead and put everything back together. And if we have oil leaks in the future, it'll be a lot easier to tell where they're coming from because not everything is going to be soaked in oil. I've gone ahead and set the RTV around the entire piece there, and I'm going to go ahead and let that sit and tack up for a few minutes before I go ahead and pop the screws in and seal it up. I'm going to wait a little bit until it dries to torque things down, so I'll maybe wait 10 minutes, put it on, hand tighten the screws, and then go back maybe in another 20 minutes to torque things down. We just want to take this piece here and put it right over the crankshaft there, I believe is what that's called. You just want to kind of wiggle it on and make sure it seals nice. Don't forget to put the pins in. There's a couple pins on it that it needs to fall into. And there we are. That is pushed on. I'm going to go ahead and just lightly hammer around and make sure everything is sealing nicely. All I'm going to do is finger tighten these to begin with, and I'm starting from the top two on the inner side, and then I'm going to work my way to the outside. So now all 4 of these are just finger tight. I'm not going to do much. I'm going to let this sit for another 10 minutes or so before I go back down and torque them to spec. Torque spec is roughly 7 to 8 foot-pounds, I believe. Don't quote me. I'm pretty sure that information I got was correct, but like I said, double check. I'm not 100%. This one just keeps going. Oh no. Oh, I just over-torqued it. Right? Oh no. I just got so lucky, guys. This screw, this last one that just kept torquing or wouldn't sit down to the right torque spec, split in half, but when I pulled it out, it was still just barely attached before it broke off inside. So I need to go get a new bolt. Probably just gonna try and source 4 of them, and then we'll get to the oil pan afterwards. New nuts and bolts for the oil pan, as well as the rear main seal case. I went ahead and just got new everything. It probably needs it. I was able to find the correct size for the rear main seal case bolts, but I think these are an 8mm top instead of a 10mm, so I'll just have to be a little extra careful torquing it down, but these are pretty low torque to my understanding, and it shouldn't make too much of a difference. We've got our rear main seal put back in. I've got these new shiny bolts on there. I haven't torqued them down yet. I'm gonna wait until the RTV sets a bit more, and in about 10-20 minutes I'll come back and torque these down to about 7 or 8 foot-pounds. I've got the oil pan here lined in some RTV, and then underneath I've got the gasket with some RTV on the motor side, just kind of seated up here nicely, and I'm going to just raise the oil pan up on here and get some of these nuts and bolts in. Oil pan is back in with all the new hardware, torqued down with the new seal. Rear main seal is in with the cover, torqued down, so we are good to go. Hopefully on those, I'm going to wait at least 24 hours to put oil in it. Not for really any reason, just to let it dry, I guess, and then I also don't even need to run this motor yet. So I'm gonna wait, let it basically seal up real nice, hopefully, and then next up we're jumping onto the transmission. I hope if you plan on tackling any of the above or mentioned projects, that this kind of helps you out and gives you at least a sense of direction. And if you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, comments down below. I'm not gonna say what you want to see next, because well, I have to put the transmission in next, so that's what's happening. And if you're new here, think about hitting that subscribe button, join the family. I will see you guys next time. Keep elevating. Adios, my friends. Take it easy.